They say room 237 has never stayed rented longer than 2 weeks. It's the kind of rumor whispered under your breath, a dark secret that the faculty tries to ignore, but everyone knows the truth. Each semester, new students are drawn to the charm of the old dormitory, its red brick facade and ivy-clad windows that tell tales of the past. But the real story is far darker than anything you'll find in the brochures. For years, no one has dared to stay longer than a fortnight in room 237, and those who do, well, they're never quite the same. Ask any resident, and you will get a story, a warning veiled in mystery and half-hearted laughter. But trust me, the truth, it's something you won't believe until you experience it yourself. Welcome to the most unsettling corner of the campus, where the walls hold memories, and every creak of the floorboard sends a chill down your spine. But as with every haunted place, someone will eventually return, and the question is, will you be the one to face the terror that no one ever escapes? It's always the same, you know. New students, fresh faces, bright-eyed and unaware of the chilling history that waits in the shadows of the old dormitory. You could call it a rite of passage, an initiation into something far darker than what anyone expects. It's not the kind of thing you can prepare for, not really. And even if you could, there's no amount of research or warnings from upperclassmen that could prepare you for the thing that lurks behind those walls. They say room 237 has never stayed rented longer than 2 weeks. That's the one thing you'll hear over and over again, whether it's from the janitor who works the night shift or the senior who tries to laugh it off as superstition. But when you dig a little deeper, you'll realize that those 2 weeks are never the same for anyone who occupies that room. Everyone who's ever stayed there, from freshmen to seniors, has reported odd things. At first, it's subtle. A flicker of the lights that makes you pause, a sound that seems out of place, a soft tapping that comes from somewhere within the walls. A sound you might convince yourself was just a building settling, right? But the longer you stay, the more those noises shift. It becomes less like the creaks of an old building and more like something else. I remember my first night in room 237 like it was yesterday. My name's Lucas, and it was my first year at the university. It's a prestigious school, well known for its history and sprawling campus, and I was lucky enough to get a spot in one of the oldest dormitories. They say the building was one of the first structures on campus, a testament to the university's long legacy. But there's something about it that feels different from all the other buildings, as if it's waiting for something or someone. I had arrived a day early, eager to get settled in before the rest of the freshman class flooded the hallways. The room was already prepared for me, the sheets crisp and the old wood floor polished to a shine. There was something charming about it, even if the wallpaper was peeling in places and the ancient wooden furniture creaked under the slightest pressure. It had character, a kind of nostalgic charm that many of the newer, more modern buildings lack. I'd heard whispers, of course, about the infamous room 237, but I didn't think much of them at the time. I was just happy to finally be here, to start my new chapter in life. The first night was uneventful, or so I thought. I unpacked my things, settled into the small dorm bed, and watched the last light of day fade from the window. The dormitory was quieter than I expected, but that only added to the comfort. I turned off the lights, eager to get some sleep. The soft hum of the old fan was the only sound in the room, the air thick with the scent of old wood and stale books. But then, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard it. A tapping, faint at first like a pen clicking against a desk. It echoed from somewhere behind the walls. I shrugged it off as the building settled in, just like I told myself the first time I heard it. But the tapping didn't stop. It grew louder, more rhythmic, as if it was trying to get my attention. I sat up in bed, confused. The room felt colder, the temperature dropping so rapidly that I could see my breath in the dim light. Who's there? I muttered, half laughing at myself, but the sound didn't stop. It was followed by a low, groaning creak from above, like something heavy shifting. The chill deepened. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The curiosity gnawed me, and before I knew it, I was out of bed, my feet silent against the cold floor. The tapping continued, though now it sounded like it was coming from behind the closet. I could feel my pulse quicken as I approached, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. My hand hovered over the closet door. I hesitated, a pit forming in my stomach. What was I about to find? I pulled the door open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing in the silence of the room. There was nothing inside except for the usual clothes, shoes, the occasional stray item I'd left behind. The tapping had stopped. The air around me felt heavy, almost suffocating. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, staring at my reflection in the tiny mirror on the wall. It wasn't until the next morning that I realized something was wrong. I had no idea how long I had been standing in front of that mirror, my body stiff and frozen in place. When I awoke, I was still in the same spot, my clothes damp with sweat. It was as if I had been standing there all night, but the clock told a different story. It had only been a few minutes. I shook my head, trying to push away the strange feeling that had settled in my chest. Just a bad dream, I told myself, but it wasn't. The next few days in room 237 were a blur. It's like I was sleepwalking through my own life, each day passing in a haze of confusion and strange fleeting memories. The students I met in the hallway seemed so distant, as if they were from another world. I would see them in passing, exchange brief pleasantries, but their faces felt like they belonged belonged to someone else. It wasn't like me, this cold distance, but the room, it had a way of pulling you into itself, making you forget everything outside of it. Every night, the tapping would return, growing louder, more insistent. It was no longer confined to the walls. It felt as if it came from beneath the floorboards, from the very foundation of the building itself. It became a rhythm, a pulse that echoed through my body and left my heart racing in my chest. Each time, I would find myself standing in front of the closet, unable to stop myself. My hand would reach for the door, trembling with anticipation, but no matter how hard I tried, I could never open it all the way. Something stopped me. I wasn't sure if it was fear or something else, but the room had a strange power over me, and the closer I got to it, the more I felt the weight of something dark and ancient pressing down on me. It wasn't long before I started noticing other things, small, almost imperceptible details that set my nerves on edge. The room's temperature was erratic. Sometimes it would feel suffocatingly hot, and other times a biting cold would seep into the walls. I could hear voices, whispers, faint and unintelligible, coming from the far corners of the room. At first, I thought it was just the sound of the building settling, but over time, the whispers grew clearer. They seemed to be saying my name. Sometimes it was a low murmur, just a breath, but other times it was sharp, calling to me, begging me to listen. One afternoon after class, I found myself wandering back to the dorm, the weight of my books heavy in my arms. It was a chilly fall day, the sky overcast and threatening rain. As I walked past the dormitory, I overheard a group of upperclassmen talking in hushed tones, casting wary glances toward the building. They were talking about room 237. I heard someone finally stayed the full 2 weeks last semester. One of them said, his voice low, but they had to move out early. Said they kept hearing noises, footsteps in the hallway, doors creaking open in the middle of the night. Yeah, another added, but that wasn't the worst part. He swore he saw something, someone, but not quite human, eyes glowing in the dark. Said it was standing right by the closet, watching him. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could it be? Could someone else have experienced what I had? Was it possible that there was something more to the stories? I had to know more. I made my way inside, my heart pounding with a strange mixture of dread and curiosity. The moment I stepped into the building, I could feel the temperature drop. The hallway was darker than usual, the old lamps flickering faintly. Room 237 stood at the end of the hall, its door was slightly ajar. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing with questions I couldn't seem to answer. What was it about this room that no one could stay in for long? And why was I so drawn to it? As I walked toward the door, I noticed something unusual. The door wasn't like the others. It wasn't just cracked. It was almost as if it was calling me, the darkness inside pulling me closer with each step. I hesitated, but the urge to enter was overwhelming. I could feel my pulse quicken as I reached out and pushed the door open. The room was different this time. The air felt thick, heavy, as if the very atmosphere was charged with something dark and powerful. The whispers were louder now, like a chorus of voices, all vying for my attention. My heart raced in my chest, but I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the floor, my body frozen in place. It was then that I saw it. In the corner of the room near the closet, there was a shadow. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, a figment of my overactive imagination. But as I stared at it, the shadow seemed to shift, growing darker and more solid. It was the figure of a man, tall and thin, but there was something wrong about it. The shadows around him twisted unnaturally, stretching and contorting like they were alive. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes again, the figure was gone, but the whispers, they remained. They were louder now, swirling around me, their words sharp and urgent. I could make out fragments of sentences, words that sent chills down my spine. Leave before it's too late. Don't look in the closet. Escape while you still can. I wanted to run, to turn around and flee, but my body wouldn't obey. I couldn't leave. The room held me and the whispers held me until finally my gaze was drawn to the closet. The door was slightly ajar, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I had to open it. It was like the room was demanding it, pulling me in, urging me to look inside. I took a step forward, my hand shaking as I reached for the door handle. It felt cold to the touch, like the frost had already started to settle on it. I pushed the door open. Inside, there was nothing but darkness. The kind of darkness that you can't see through. A void that seems to swallow the light around it. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a brief moment, I almost pulled my hand back. But something deep inside me compelled me to reach further, to step into the abyss. As I stepped inside, the air grew colder, the darkness more suffocating. I felt a presence, an overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone. It was like something was watching me, something that had been waiting for me to make this move. I reached out into the darkness, and that's when I felt it, cold fingers wrapping around my wrist, pulling me forward. I screamed and jerked back, but the grip didn't loosen. It pulled me deeper into the darkness, further into the void. The cold grip around my wrist was inescapable. My heart pounded my chest as I struggled against it, but it only tightened, pulling me deeper into the abyss of the closet. I could feel the darkness around me, thick and suffocating, swallowing all the light that remained in the room. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, but I could feel the sharp, icy fingers of whatever was holding me. Each tug made me feel lighter, like I was being pulled into another dimension, another world entirely. I screamed, a raw, frantic sound, but it was swallowed by the darkness. The air was thick, the smell of decay hanging in the air like something long forgotten. The walls of the closet seemed to close in on me, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. I kicked my feet, desperate to break free, but it was as if the darkness had a mind of its own, and it refused to let me go. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed in the silence, followed by a deep, guttural growl. The grip around my wrist loosened, and I was yanked backward, stumbling out of the closet and onto the cold wooden floor. I gasped for air, my body shaking, but the grip was gone. I looked up, heart racing, expecting to see something, anything, that could explain what had just happened. The room was empty. Just as quickly as it had all begun, the darkness seemed to lift, and I was left in the dim light of the room, breathing heavily, my mind racing to process what had just occurred. The whispers were gone, replaced by a suffocating silence that felt more terrifying than any sound. I glanced over at the closet, half expecting to see something emerge from it, but there was nothing, just an empty space. I didn't know what to think anymore. I stumbled to my feet, my legs shaky and unsteady. The room felt different now, heavier, as if something had changed, something irreversible. I had to get out of there. I couldn't stay in this room any longer, but just as I moved toward the door, I froze. There, in the corner of the room, was a figure, a man or something like a man. He stood tall, his back turned to me, his shoulders broad and tense. The air around him shimmered with a dark energy, and though I couldn't make out his features, I could feel his presence like a weight pressing down on me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at him. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The man turned slowly, his movements deliberate, as if he knew exactly how terrified I was. His eyes, when they met mine, were glowing, faintly, like embers dying in a darkened room. The coldness in his gaze made my skin crawl, and I could feel my heart stop in my chest. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low and raspy, like gravel being ground beneath the heel of a boot. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was tight, as if something had lodged itself there, preventing me from speaking. He took a step forward, and the ground beneath me seemed to tremble. Each movement he made sent a shock of fear through my body, making it harder to breathe. His eyes didn't leave mine, and it felt like he was pulling me in, drawing me closer with every step. "You're not supposed to be here," he repeated, his voice now a hiss, the words coated with something ancient and malevolent. I opened my mouth to protest, to ask what he meant, but before I could speak, he raised a hand. A cold, icy chill swept through the room, as if the temperature had dropped to below freezing. The man's hand hovered in the air, his fingers curling slightly. The moment his hand moved, I felt it like a sharp, invisible force that hit me square in the chest. I was thrown backward, my body slamming into the wall behind me with a sickening thud. I gasped for air, disoriented, my head spinning. The man stepped forward, his footsteps slow and measured, as if he was in no rush. He wasn't afraid of me. He wasn't afraid of anything. He stood in front of me, towering over me, his presence overwhelming. The room seemed to grow darker around him, the shadows stretching and contorting like they were alive. I couldn't take my eyes off him. "What do you want from me?" I finally managed to croak, my voice weak and trembling. The man smiled, a cold, twisted smile that made my blood run cold. His teeth were sharp, almost too sharp, like they didn't belong to a human being. "I want nothing," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You are the one who came seeking answers, but now you found them." I shook my head, struggling to comprehend what he was saying. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "Who are you?" For a moment, the man didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes glowing brighter with each passing second. Then finally, he spoke again. "Room 237, he said, his voice reverberating through the room like a thunderclap. "It's a place where souls get lost, where the past never truly dies. And now, you become a part of it." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I understood. This room, this building, it was cursed. The whispers, the shadows, the darkness that seemed to consume everything. It wasn't just some haunting or ghost story. It was something much worse, something ancient, something that had been feeding on the souls of those who dared to enter. "You're too late," the man said, his voice almost sad now. "You've already crossed the line. There's no going back." I stumbled to my feet, my body shaking with fear. I had to get out of there. I couldn't stay, but the man wasn't finished. "You think you can leave?" He laughed, a low, menacing sound that echoed through the room. "The door's already closed, and once you're in, there's no getting out." I looked around, panic rising in my chest. The door, where was the door? I turned toward the entrance, but it was gone. The room had shifted, the walls closing in on me. The once familiar space now felt like a labyrinth, twisting and shifting, a maze with no way out. "No!" I cried, my voice desperate. "No, please, let me go." But the man only stood there, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. "You're not the first," he said softly, "and you won't be the last." The darkness had taken over the room, but it wasn't just a lack of light. It was something deeper, something suffocating. I had crossed into a place where the laws of reality no longer applied. The room was no longer just a room. It was a prison. prison, and I was its captive. I spun around searching for the door, but it was gone. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, the floor beneath me shifting like quicksand. The thing standing before me, was now everywhere. His presence filled the room, his cold smile never leaving his face as he watched me struggle. His eyes glowed brighter now, the light almost unbearable, and the air around me crackled with tension, like a storm about to break. "You can't escape," his voice echoed in the air surrounding me. "It's already too late. You've crossed the line, Lucas. You are part of this place now." My chest tightened, and I could barely breathe. The panic rose in my throat, choking me. "I don't understand. Why? What do you want from me?" The figure took a step forward, his movement slow and deliberate. Every step he took made the ground tremble beneath me. The air grew colder, and the shadows stretched out from all corners of the room, reaching for me like twisted fingers. "I want nothing," he said, his voice dark and hollow. "I'm a part of this place, a part of its history, its curse, and now so are you." "Curse?" I gasped, trying to force the words out of my dry throat. "What curse? What is this place?" The man laughed softly, his voice almost mocking. "This place, it's where time doesn't flow the way you know it. It's where the past, present, and future collide. People come here thinking it's just another dorm, another room to stay in, but they're wrong. Room 237. It's not just a room, it's a door." I swallowed hard, my mind reeling. "A door? A door to what?" "The door to another world," he continued, his eyes narrowing. "The world where souls get trapped. It's a place where the lost are forgotten, and those who come seeking answers become part of its collection." "No, this can't be real," I shouted, my voice cracking as I stumbled backward. "This is just some nightmare. I'm not staying here. I'm leaving." I turned, searching for a way out, but the walls closing around me, they seemed to pulse with a life of their own, squeezing me tighter, suffocating me. The room had become a maze, the same walls shifting and twisting, leading me nowhere. The air grew thicker, colder, and I could feel my body growing weaker with every breath I took. The whispers were back, louder than ever, swirling around me, their words indistinct, but filled with an undeniable urgency. "Help, leave, don't." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sound, trying to steady my breathing. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting. When I opened my eyes again, the figure was gone, but the room had changed. The walls were no longer smooth and solid. They were cracked, the plaster crumbling and revealing something darker beneath, a faint glow, like a reflection in water. I took a step forward, drawn to the glow. The floor beneath my feet creaked, and the shadows seemed to follow me, crawling along the edges of the room like they had a life of their own. The glow grew brighter, and I could make out faint shapes within it. Figures, shadows, faces, none of them fully formed, but all of them staring at me. "Help us," the voices whispered, the same voices that had tormented me since the moment I arrived. Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling with fear. The figures in the glow began to take shape, slowly at first, then more clearly. They were people, students, faculty, all wearing the same worn, tired expressions. They were trapped, their eyes vacant, their bodies twisted and deformed by time and something darker. They had been here, just like me. "We were once like you," one of them said, his voice hoarse like it hadn't been used in years. "We came seeking answers, just like you did. And now, we're part of it." "Part of what?" I gasped, backing away from the figures, the realization sinking in. The man's voice filled the room again, cold and menacing. "Part of the curse, part of the collection. Once you stay in room 237, you belong to it. Forever. I'll find a way out." "You can't," the man's voice echoed, now directly behind me. I whipped around, but there was no one there. "This place doesn't let you leave, not unless it's ready." I turned back toward the figures in the glow, their eyes locked on me. They reached out, their arms stretching toward me, their faces contorting into grotesque, twisted smiles. I could feel their hands, their cold, clammy touches. They reached for me, pulling me closer to the darkness. "I won't stay," I screamed, my voice cracking with desperation. "I won't be part of you." But no matter how much I screamed, no matter how much I struggled, I could feel the darkness pulling me closer. The figures, now more than just shadows, grabbed hold of me, their hands cold and unyielding, dragging me into the center of the glowing mass. Suddenly, the room went pitch black. I was falling into a void that seemed endless, a pit that consumed everything. My thoughts, my breath, my very soul. The faces of the figures flashed before me, their hollow eyes staring into mine as I descended deeper into the abyss. And then, in an instant, everything stopped. I was still. My body felt weightless, floating in a dark sea of nothing. The air around me was suffocating, thick with a presence that was more powerful than anything I'd ever experienced. It was like being trapped in the deepest part of the ocean, where the pressure crushed your lungs, but you could never scream. There was only silence. I didn't know how long I was suspended in that dark void. Time didn't seem to exist here. And then, as if from a great distance, I heard it. A voice. It was faint at first, barely a whisper, but it grew louder, clearer. "Do you want to leave?" I didn't answer at first, unsure if I could even move. The voice called again, this time more insistent, more demanding. "Do you want to leave?" The words seemed to pierce through the darkness. darkness wrapping themselves around my mind. The cursed room had me, but there was a way out. There had to be. If I could just answer the question, maybe I could break free. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I want to leave. The voice echoed through the oppressive darkness, its tone growing louder, more insistent. I was still floating in that void, my body suspended in the inescapable silence, the weight of everything pressing down on me, suffocating me. The darkness was everywhere, an endless abyss that threatened to consume me whole. Do you want to leave? The voice was a whisper now, but it felt like it was coming from inside my head. It wasn't just a question. It was a demand, a test of my will, my very soul. I felt it burrowing into me, taking root deep inside my mind. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to fight back, but it felt like the very air around me had become too thick, too heavy. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a sharp, icy chill crawl through my veins, but I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't ignore the question. Do you want to leave? He repeated. Yes, I whispered, the word barely escaping my lips. Yes, I want to leave. But the silence that followed felt suffocating, as though the very room was holding its breath, waiting for something. The weight of the darkness seemed to grow heavier, as if the entire universe was waiting for my answer to be enough. But the curse had already begun to reveal its true face, and I was no longer certain if there even was an escape. The air seemed to shift around me, and a faint light pierced the suffocating blackness. At first, I thought it was just a trick of my mind, but the light grew brighter and more defined. It was a figure, standing in the distance, casting a faint, eerie glow that stretched through the void like an ominous lighthouse. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but as the light drew nearer, the figure became clearer. It was a woman. Her face was twisted in a silent scream, her eyes wide with terror, frozen in an eternal moment of agony. Her hands reached out, but they were transparent, fading in and out of existence like a fading dream. Help me. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried an overwhelming sense of desperation. I could feel her pain, her soul, trapped within the curse of room 237, just like the others. She wasn't the only one. There were others here, lost souls who had tried to escape but had failed. Their faces were fading in and out of the darkness, each one frozen in their own moment of horror. Their voices were a low murmur like a chant, whispering the same word over and over. Leave, leave. It was as though the entire room had become a prison, each soul trapped in its own eternal nightmare. It wasn't just the physical room that was cursed, it was everything. The entire place, the very foundation, had been built on a dark secret, and now it was holding all of us hostage. You can't leave, the voice from earlier said, now sharp and cutting through the air like a blade. You belong to it now. I spun around, the familiar figure of the man now standing in front of me, his glowing eyes fixed on mine. There was no fear in his expression, only a cold, malevolent sense of finality. You're just like them, he said, his voice low and ominous. You came seeking answers, but there's no escape. You've been marked. You will never leave this place. His words hit me like a physical blow. My heart ached with the truth of them, and a cold dread settled deep in my chest. But I wasn't ready to give up. I wasn't ready to accept his fate. I will leave, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I will find a way. The man smirked. You can try, he said, his tone dripping with disdain. But remember this, room 237 isn't just a place. It's a choice. Once you walk through its door, it takes a part of you, and it never gives it back. I felt the weight of his words. I understood now. It wasn't just a room that was cursed. It was the very souls of those who entered it. The building was alive, feeding off the loss, feeding off their fear, their desperation. And it was never going to let me go. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't let it win. I had to escape. I turned away from the man and ran. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what the path ahead held, but I had no choice. I ran, my feet pounding against the shifting ground, my body moving on instinct. The room twisted around me, walls closing in and warping like a living nightmare. The air grew colder, the whispers growing louder, but I pushed on, the voices screaming at me, urging me to stop, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Then I saw it, the door. It was there, at the far end of the room, bathed in a faint, unnatural light. The same door that had disappeared before was now back, standing like a beacon in the center of the chaos. I reached for it, my hand trembling as I touched the cold metal. The moment my fingers brushed against the door handle, a surge of energy hit me, a violent shock that sent pain racing through my body. The room trembled, the walls groaning and shifting, but I didn't let go. I couldn't. With all the strength I had left, I pulled the door open. The world outside was nothing like I expected. It wasn't the bright sunlight or the fresh air of freedom that I thought I would feel. No, it was worse. It was as if I had stepped into another dimension, a reflection of the world I once knew, but distorted, twisted, and dark. The sky was an unnatural shade of red, and the ground beneath me was cracked, covered in dust and debris. Everything was still, silent, and in the distance, I could hear the whispers, faint and distant at first, but growing louder with every step I took. Leave, leave. I looked back at the door, half expecting it to close behind me, but it remained open, its cold light casting a long shadow on the ground. And that's when I understood. I had left the room, room, but the room had never truly left me. It would never let go. Room 237 wasn't just a place, it was a part of me now, just as it had been for everyone before me. The curse had claimed me, just as it had claimed them. I could feel its weight pressing down on me, the echoes of the lost souls whispering in my ears. They would always be with me. The room had taken a part of me, and it would never give it back. I had escaped, yes, but I wasn't free. And as I walked into the twisted world that lay before me, I knew that my life would never be the same again. The whispers would follow me. The room would follow me forever.